thank you very should go when the camera says go. But thank you very much for joining me here on the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. This is Mark Anthony Dyson. If you have more questions about what I do, you can go to voiceofjobseekers.com. Today, I have with me Tom Spiggle of Spiggle Law Firm, and he's got a new book out. Now, for those who've been listening for the past 6, 7 years, even though we're about 11 years old, you've seen Tom fair amount, probably about 5, 6 times, maybe Tom, right?
I think that's
So,
right.
uh, so this is his new book, and I'm holding it up here so you can see. And his new book, Fired, Afraid You Might Be. And I think everybody now is pretty commonplace where everybody gets separated, somewhat involuntary. Sometimes the involuntary is a surprise. Sometimes it's slow cooking. Isn't that right, Tom?
That's right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think though. I think for a lot of people, um, I think right now in where we are in job search in the workplace, you got to prepare an exit plan. I think everybody should plan an exit plan or have a way to exit in their time of employment. No matter how good it may seem, that no matter how many guarantees you may get, it's like having a good business plan. Every good business plan has somewhat of an exit plan. These are the ways I would go about leaving the business. Would you say that that would be about right for most professionals?
Yeah, and thanks again for having me on your show, Mark. I
Sure.
love your work and enjoy being here. Yeah, I think
Thank
that's
you.
exactly right. And one of the things that I kind of highlight in the book, as you know, is having both an attorney who can help you if you need it, but then having people who can help you get that next better job. That's why I profile you and some other great career services folks in there because I think that's exactly right. You need to have a plan because it's not a matter of if, it's when, and it may be you're leaving voluntarily. So it's not that everybody's going to get fired, but it's much more common these days. As we know, there's not as much loyalty on either side, but there are any number of ways that you'll end up leaving that job. Like you say, even though if it's a good one and you like the people you work with and you like management, you never know when that move cross country is coming and they won't do remote, or you get a new boss and the new boss
Hmm.
isn't like the old boss. So absolutely, completely agree.
Yeah, I think now people are more concerned about having some kind of being able to have some kind of recourse because they're asked to come back into the job, which you know, for the most part, most people won't have a recourse. We know that. However, there's some that might try to split the difference, and I know this might be apart a little bit from, but this is a more current issue. They might try to split the difference between. Well, there are certain people who are able to. I mean, they're not offers, but a lot of people try to divide by race or by age or by gender because they have to go back as opposed to others may stay back. And that's kind of a hard place to make these days, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think a lot of times these cases are not cut and dry, and it really takes an experienced attorney to highlight the relevant evidence. But you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. There are certainly cases where an employer takes action that it's unclear what their motives are, or they're not clearly discriminatory, and those can be tough cases.
Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing some of that though with pregnancy. I think you had an
Yes.
example of a pregnant woman
Yeah.
in your book about how she's facing it. But I think the people who are facing it, specifically women, who are facing it, who are almost who've even gotten laid off while they were pregnant, or
Sure.
have been asked to come into the office in their last trimester, or all kinds of things. You know, if you could watch version of what, or or is it version of what what in those particular cases where they're pregnant women who may be struggling with deciding, you know, and kind of being caught. Uh, in between termination or some kind of separation, that might be somewhat illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We've seen, in my first book, You're Pregnant, You're Fired. I remember when I wrote it, people were like, well, does that still happen? I'm like, yeah, it still happens. Employers, well, though, you probably would be surprised. Some people might be surprised what they do put in writing, but a lot of times it's not, oh, you're pregnant, therefore you're fired, which would be an open and shut case.
Hmm.
So it really is looking at, you know, what what are the factors that led to you being laid off or fired, or were you doing fine before and all of a sudden all the things that you're doing now are not up to snuff, but the guy down the hall who doesn't have kids is doing the same thing and is getting bonuses, knocking the top out of it. Are you being treated differently, even if they're not coming right out and saying like, we don't want you here because you are pregnant? And then
Hmm.
pregnancy, we also have, there we have the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is fairly new, that requires that employers give you accommodations. Well, some employers give you accommodations to be able to continue to work, or if you have a high risk pregnancy, you're going to be covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there are lots of potential ways that you could use the law to your benefit. It is very complicated, and even for attorneys, unless you follow this field pretty closely, you may not know all the ins and outs. So that's why I'm a fan of, you know, go talk with an attorney. You don't have to hire them. You just go, pay for an hour of their time, because usually within an hour, an attorney that does this work can give you a pretty good idea of where you stand in a kind of a broad sense of whether you have something that's worth pursuing. So there are any number of protections for people who are, who are pregnant. The tougher cases are when there's like they recently had at some of the big tech companies, there are these mass layoffs. And,
Hmm.
lo and behold, a lot of people who are pregnant are the ones who are on the chopping block. You can still bring those cases, either by showing intentional discrimination or what we call disparate impact. Like you've got a policy that you're not intending to discriminate against people, but it's having a heavier impact on some people than others. Those cases can be brought. And I think for any case, whether it's pregnancy or not, if you are in the process of being terminated or if you're, undergoing a RIF, like negotiate the best deal that you can. A lot of
Hmm.
people, maybe most people, don't want to, file your case in court and, haul their butt down to federal court and deal with all of that. Some cases are worth that. But, a lot of times there are things that you can do to put yourself in a better situation. Buy yourself another 6 months, buy yourself another $50,000, buy yourself some more health care while you're working with, reading some of your good work or working with some of the career professionals that I list in the book or that are out there everywhere to help you get on to that next better job. So just because they offer you something doesn't mean you can't negotiate it, without having to, file a lawsuit, without even having to necessarily hire an attorney, or even if you do have that attorney come forward and negotiate on your behalf, which sometimes is good, but it does up the temperature a little bit. So, get your best deal that you can.
Yeah, many times I think people, because they carry emotional trauma from their jobs when they're leaving or they're being fired or they're being laid off, that they don't want to revisit that as sort of like, being in the same room with your abuser again, kind of,
Yeah, sure.
right? So part of that I can understand why people want to walk away. But however, the other group that has had an amicable relationship with the employer up until the time that they were let go, that is a great chance to be able to have that conversation. Maybe if you need to still, uh, you know, kind of drain off the fat, so to speak, uh, from the incident and how it all happened, and it was a surprise. And many times it is more as a surprise these days. I mean, to me, BetterOff.com kind of laid the groundwork for all of what a lot of people do now. If you remember, they were the ones who had their CEO fire people totally unexpectedly back
Yeah.
in, I think it was November or December of 2021. So since then, there's been all these people who've gotten last minute notice, and it's been okay. And that within itself is kind of traumatic. But being that it's kind of has become this very weird relationship or this thing now where people are having to deal with the process of being laid off or fired, then try to reconfigure enough to do that. So is there any? I guess we talked a little bit about preparing an exit plan, but when those kind of things happen, what do you see works really well with people in those situations?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, and this is easier said than done, right? But keep your wits about
Right.
you. You know, this is, of course, emotional, and it is in some ways like a professional divorce, so I completely understand
Hmm.
that. But keep your wits about you. Know that you have, at least as a legal matter, some time. It's not like your rights are going to expire within the next week. So keep your wits about you. Realize that this is happening to a lot of these, a lot of people these days. There are a lot of resources out there, right, that weren't even out there 10 years ago.
Right.
Or even if they were, it wasn't as easy to find them. And
Hmm.
come up if you don't have if you haven't, right. There's the best time to develop the plan was 5 years ago. The second best time is like right now, right? Like, so if
Yeah.
you're in that right now situation, buy yourself a little bit of time. I mean, one of the things that we see with people is, particularly, they've got a severance agreement. Sometimes there'll be a deadline. If you're over 40, there's certain laws that excuse me, certain laws that require that you get at least 21 days to review it. But if you're under 40, those laws are not in place. But understand those are negotiable. There's nothing in the law about that deadline. And so if you need to
Hmm.
buy yourself an extra week, ask the employer. Say, hey, kind of putting the pieces back together. I need some more time to consider the severance agreement, which gives you time to find an attorney, to talk to an attorney. And you'd be surprised, a lot of times employers are completely open to you talking to an attorney, because they don't want you
Hmm.
to turn around and say later, well, I didn't know what I was signing. So keep
Yeah.
your wits about you. Know there are a lot of resources out there, both help you find another job. And like I said, there are a lot of things that you can do without, kind of, as you point out, like going into the lion's den. Like, there are a lot of things you can do with an
Hmm.
attorney without one to negotiate that don't require you seeing your old boss again. They don't require you to talk to HR.
Hmm.
And they don't require you to kind of relive that trauma. So that would be my first piece of advice. Take a deep breath. You've got some time. If they're putting us, a hard deadline on you, for the severance agreement, ask them for more time and understand you've got some leverage. Even if the company didn't do anything wrong, they still want your signature on that document, because they get a release of claims, right? You can't sue for any reason whatsoever. And
Hmm.
they often get other things. There'll be a non-disparagement, which is a clause that says you can't go out and talk bad about the company. And the company can't get those things unless you sign that document.
Right.
Um, so they want that signature. Sorry, I'm fighting off a cold here.
Yeah, I
Go
see. Not a problem.
ahead.
But I think one of the things, well, probably just so that we could wrap it up too, people, if you feel like you have a recourse, and you do mention in the book, but I remember when I worked at the American Bar Association many moons ago, the pro bono of the state association, the bar associations, they have free time where you could go and seek pro bono services. At least that could be your first shot in talking to someone without paying out so much paying the $200-300 an hour that would cost to
Sure.
get a consultation.
Yeah, absolutely. Look for those like we do at least a couple times a year. We do a pro bono day. We just did one last week, actually, at our
Hmm.
firm on a Saturday, so people can come in and talk to an attorney for free. We had probably at least 20 people come to the office. So there are those opportunities out there. You're right. Bar associations will often have them. Sometimes law schools,
Hmm.
some of the bigger firms will have pro bono programs. But also remember, there are other resources. Like, for example, like in Virginia, there's the Fairfax County Bar Referral Service, and
Mm.
you can go there, and you have to pay, but it's minimal. I want to say it's like $40, and they will connect you with an attorney with expertise in the area that you need to talk about. So, say it's an employment issue, you call them up and say, "Hey, I just got fired. I want somebody to review my severance agreement," and then that $40 gets you in half an hour. I believe it's half an hour call with an attorney at no additional charge. And then if you want to hire the attorney, of course you can. There's another great resource. Now, it's been a while since I've been on it, but avo.com, which is
Hmm.
a legal site, and you can go and post questions there, and for free.
And how do you spell that? Do you
A
remember how to
V
spell it?
A V V O Avo.
Abo.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
and you can go and you can post questions there for free, and attorneys will answer them. Sometimes you got to be a little buyers beware because any attorney anywhere can answer them. But I believe they do also have a similar paid service where it's pretty minimal, and and you can get a consult. I'm sorry, Mark. One second. I'm just going to grab some water real quick.
Okay, go ahead. But I think those resources, yeah, that will save you some money and some time. I remember, and these services have been going on for decades now. They're nothing new. So the more that uh, your local state bar has done them, the more helpful they're going to be because they've learned how to maximize people's time because they're on the clock as well. So, and they're on the clock for free as far as you're concerned. But
Yeah,
anyway, I thank you very much for that. And again, your book. I do want to ask one more question regarding AI, and I think there's a
sure.
kind of a tie in because I think people are looking at AI from a discriminatory point of view, and more jobs are beginning to work with artificial intelligence, but kind of they're not sure how it's going to work out, and it really is hard to say because it's in the beginning. But I guess when everybody wants, a lot of especially tech companies and big companies, they're copycat companies. They're
Yeah.
doing things just because the other ones repeating, just like the layoffs. The big ones start laying off, then all the little ones start laying off just because of in the name of, and we can go on about that. But when if people are concerned about artificial intelligence, or maybe from what you've heard so far, what seems to be the main talking points from the employee standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great point, and of course, AI is the thing, right?
Hmm.
It's taken the world by storm, and I think it's here to stay and will only become more impressive or dangerous depending on how you look at it.
Right.
In the workplace, I think the big thing that we have seen, at least the current iteration of AI, these large language models, is they can be as prejudiced as anybody else because
Right.
they're trained. They vary, not all of them this way, but they are trained on the internet. I mean,
Hmm.
ChatGPT sucked up the internet, and so in sucking up the internet, they sucked up all the crazy that's in the dark corners of it, and it's not yet so intelligent that it can parse those out. So it's just trying to figure out, based on those crazy algorithms that I don't understand, kind of what the next word is, the next sentence is that would make sense to answer your question. So it's just pulling from all these resources, and it can pull from a white supremacist site. It can just as easily as it
Hmm.
can pull from the ACLU, and it's not right now making the distinction. And so we have seen that, and I think a lot of companies were trying to say, or at least some of them, hey, look, it wasn't us, it was the AI, right? Like we weren't trying to discriminate, it was the AI. We didn't know it was like it was going a little haywire. And the EEOC recently came out with guidance, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which, as you know, is the big federal agency
Hmm.
that governs a lot of this. And they came out with some guidance that said, you know, no way, sorry, company, if you're using AI, for instance, to screen resumes, which we've seen a lot of, even as I think we're probably going to see engage in the early interview processes. I mean, this is going to be crazy stuff.
Hmm.
If your AI that you hire or that you contract for, acts in discriminatory fashion, you're still on the hook. So it's early days. I think we're going to see more of that. Colorado recently was, I think, the first state to pass laws that provide some protections to employees with regard to AI. The Department of Labor just, I think, this week released guidance, high level principles, but how AI should be deployed in the workplace, basically encouraging, among other things, that employees have some say, whether it's through unions or otherwise, how AI is deployed. Whether companies will listen to that, and I'm sure some of them will, some of them won't. But just know a company can't say, "Oh, well, the AI did it. We weren't trying to discriminate. It was the machine's fault." Courts aren't buying that.
Well, what's interesting now, I did this probably about a year ago, but I put my name through Chat GPT. And because of what I do and what I've done and where I've been, my name will appear as opposed to someone who doesn't do what I do and doesn't do with the amount of visibility does it. However, I'm just wondering, and the reason why I'm talking about this because you know, as you probably know, I've been talking a lot about job scams and
Oh,
privacy
yes.
and all
Yep.
that, and I think there is a concern, and it hasn't been talked about yet about the, perhaps AI overreaching on issues that where they may pick up little breadcrumbs, so to speak, to put together in a narrative. Uh, I mean, you don't have to go through what people can possibly do, but is there something that maybe you've thought of that people should look out for in their activities and where they keep and such as filling out employment applications and that information being anything that's digital, I think that's going to be susceptible to be picked up to be used as intel, good or bad.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I wish I had some great defensive things or suggestions. I don't know of any. I mean, I think this is going to continue to be, some of the federal and state regulators are looking at, like, how do you protect privacy? I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the wild west right now, and I think it's just a sign of our times. I mean, if you are like 99% of us on the internet, and you're filling out forms and you're clicking things and you're visiting pages, Target knows more about you than the NSA does. I mean, they just this
Mm-hmm.
all this information is being sucked up, and I think people just have to be aware that there could be ways that this information could be used nefariously or at least inaccurate. So but I am not aware now of anything like if somebody asks you to fill out a form, because you got to apply to a job, like, I mean, you could say no, but you're probably not getting the job, and so
Right,
what does the company do
right.
with that information? It's a hot topic, and I think it's gonna have to be kind of a top-down solution with federal regulators doing something. There'll probably be lawsuits over this. I think you just saw, with Chat GPT-4, rolling out, and Scarlett Johansson saying, "Hey, I think you use my voice as the
Yeah.
voice of the Chat GPT-4," and Chat GPT, OpenAI denied that, but this is an example of how this can go. And in that case, she hired a lawyer, and the lawyer wrote him a letter. Chat GPT or OpenAI kind of backed off of it, but I think we'll see lawsuits, and the courts are going to have to help sort this out. But I wish, even just for my own self, I wish I knew how to keep my data, uh, out of the hands of large language models. But I'm not sure there's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, and I don't think there's it's too early in the game, and I'm sure there'll be lines drawn somewhere along the line as to
Yeah,
what can be used and what can't be used or what can be exposed.
right.
But I just think about there's a company in Asia uh, or job portals that, that AI deep fakes were used or well, technology was used to scrape a lot of private information from employment applications. And I
Yeah,
think that's going to be a what happens over there is going to happen over here at some point. It's just going to be interesting to see how it stays. So I will just go ahead and put your book up here. Uh, Definitely thank you so much for the friendship and your accessibility during the probably the busiest time that you'll have in the next few years. I want to thank Tom Spiggle again, Spiggle Law Firm, uh, Fired, Afraid You Might Be. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on the Voice of Job Seekers. For the rest of you, thank you very much. Peace and the value of love. We'll see you the next time.
all right. Well, thanks, Mark. As usual, that was awesome.
Yes.